Welcome back to Closing Conversation, the show for founders, leaders, and sellers who win together. I'm your host, Max Notice. Today's guests are David Kidder and Grace Keenan. David is a repeat founder, builder, and CEO who has taken multiple companies to exit. Grace has worked with David for the past 6 years, starting at Bionic, helping scale that work through Accenture after the acquisition, and now leading growth across David's newest companies. We talk about what changes when you've built companies before, why David sees founding more like coaching a professional sports team than building a family, and why there's a big difference between being nice and being kind. The major theme: growth is everybody's job. Not just the founder, not just sales, not just marketing, everyone. David and Grace break down systems, trust, AI, human connection, founder-led sales, team accountability, and what it takes to scale beyond one's personal network. Let's get into it. All right, so let's kick things off very simply. David, Grace, it is awesome to have you both on the show. Why don't you go ahead and just start by introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Grace. I've been working with David for around 6 years now. Started at his company Bionic, and once that was acquired by Accenture, we scaled that throughout the organization. I've always been kind of on the growth side. And now as David launches his 2 new companies, I'm running VP of growth. So running everything behind him and making sure we really grow.
This is actually our first podcast together. So we've never done this. Grace has been with me for many, many years. So it's fun to have you're out in front with me here, and she's the engine behind all this. So very grateful to have you do this with me, Grace. I'm David Kidder, co-founder and CEO of 2 companies, the board of Life and Primordium. Just grateful to see you, Max, and looking forward to this conversation about growth and revenue and sales and all the things that go behind building a company that ultimately gets to exit. And we're going to talk very vulnerably about how that gets done.
Excellent. Fantastic. So, David, you've built a number of companies, in your career. Grace, you've known David over the past 6 years. Clearly you work well together. Otherwise you wouldn't both be on this podcast. David, what do you think has changed? Like, you started your first company, you have expectations, you have character, you have all these different things. Where do you think, if Grace met you back then, what would be the big differences between you as a founder then and you as a founder now?
I think I'm much more direct now. I think back at my old companies, there were, we had 4 exits, 2 worked, 2 didn't, been through highs and lows of those journeys. I used to try to make people feel is almost like a family-like way where building something and belong to it. And while we still have qualities like that, I think of it much more like a professional sports team where I'm kind of like the head coach who happens to own the team. So it's a very different natured relationship. The belief is still there, like the athlete, the Grace of the world. My commitment to them is that they get to the Olympics, they get to the championship. We're going to get to an exit. That's never not happened. The question is how amazing will it be? And how amazing the part is going to be really predicated on how amazing they are and how they grow. And so there's a difference between being nice and kind. And I think I'm still very kind, but sometimes kind can have high expectations and be courageous in truth. And that's sort of a big difference that it was, even at Bionic, our last company together.
I like that line. There's a difference between being nice and kind. And I just like that. There is a really big distinction. Let me ask, Grace, so this is your second run with David, the second company. What is it about working with him, or even the outcome? Why are you still here?
Kind of building off of what David said, it's a very high trust culture that he brings. So one, you kind of have the vision set of where you want to go. So you know what you're working towards over these next couple of years. That is super inspiring. But then because of the culture he's created, there's trust and there's pushing. And I find myself really growing in my skill sets throughout it. It's been a constant journey of just really me leveling up and being able to work with someone who's had so much experience and kind of get that like early on in my career has been insanely valuable, and something that's kind of why I'm like obsessed with it. So keep showing up.
Right on. Well, so let me ask you a question now, just even like understanding the breakdown in responsibilities, org, growth plans, et cetera. Grace, you're the head of growth from what we'd said. David, you're a top salesman. How do you guys break down that responsibility when it comes to bringing new people into the fold?
So I'll give you a couple different sort of mindsets to think about the job of a founder, but also the organization of a team, which will explain the answer to this. So the job of a founder is three things and three things only. One is vision, be able to predict a future 3 years in the future and back, and being right and on time in the year that you're in, how you deploy your time, energy, and your money. The second job is talent, which is you got to be able to bring the best people in the world and put them in the right seats at the right time and give them the tools and the resources to be successful in the mission of the vision, the first thing. The third is you never run out of money. So there's only two ways to do that. You either earn it or you raise it. I've done both, raised tens of millions in venture for the best VCs in the world over the years. And also we bootstrapped our last company to $28 million run rate in 6-7 years and could do that as well. This idea of commercial truth, where does it live? Raising money from VC is not commercial truth. It's an idea validation. You want to be getting commercial truth that's in real exchange of value, that's economic with customers. So that's the first job. The second is assembling a team with no overlaps. So you want a puzzle that fits all the pieces you need at the core with no overlap. One of those pieces, typically the founder has more liability and opportunity than others, but it's equal in the context of all of our jobs. And so I cannot do what Grace does, and Grace probably doesn't do what I do. But together, in the same way, two mediocre companies don't make a great company, but two really strong systems and relationship people together can do something that not even a team with the best of intentions can do. Grace and I have figured out the seams on how to stitch those skills together to build the system and then amplify that in my effort to call people into our story, which is what I think of sales, is getting people to join you in the mission and rewarding each other both with value and economics.
Got it. So, well then, Grace, can I ask your direct responsibilities? Because I feel like the term, like the position head of growth, was not something you heard maybe 10 years ago. And now it's every company has a head of growth. So in the Stockton Malone, Jordan Pippen, of your relationship, he's handling those responsibilities. What is on your plate?
That's probably the one sports metaphor that I can track. So that's funny. But I will say, as David said, it's really calling people into the mission. So we always kind of think of it as sharing, not selling. What's really unique about David is, as this being the fifth and sixth companies he's had, and the new companies we're building are really bringing those kind of war stories, those insider knowledge to the enterprise. And that's what we're trying to bring. And again, in a sharing, not selling kind of way. And for David, that muscle is very genuine and it's very natural. He's just good at it. And even if he weren't trying to build a company around it, I think that's something that he would be doing. He would be coaching C-suite. He would be networking with them. He would be kind of ingrained in how they're thinking in conversations about how they're thinking about the future. So while he's out there just doing what he does, where I come in is building the system around that. How are we tracking those conversations? If they mention something that we might be useful with, how can we share more and just make sure that one kind of that trigger moment happens for them, they're thinking of us, whether that's through the nurturing that we're doing, the content engine we're building, other stories around case studies that we have, things like that. So we're never forcing our information on them or approaching them as if we're a vendor trying to get them to write a check. It's always, we're here to think out loud with you. We're here to work on this with you, which that's all David's tone and voice naturally. But how can I bring in the tracking and making sure we're following up, making sure we're answering all their questions, they have what they need, so that when the planning cycles do come around, we're there.
What's funny is you're saying, well, David's out there and he's networking and he's talking, and I'm thinking, well, that makes no sense to me because David has no personality whatsoever. Completely kidding, obviously. So, well, let me ask you about that, David. So when it comes to building that network, maybe when you enter the working world, you have some sort of a network, but you don't really understand what that means. And I like the way you bring, we're sharing, we're not really selling. And, very big believer in selling starts when you stop selling and start helping. But in order to do that properly, you need to have a lot of opportunities. You have to have a lot of different people, because if you have 5 people in front of you, you might not be able to help any of those 5. And if you're then tasked with a sale, you're going to force something somewhere, and now you're being a jerk. Whereas if you have that big network, you can get in front of a lot of people, and the people where it clicks and they say that actually would be helpful, then this makes sense to roll the conversation forward. So, how do you build that network? How do you maintain that network? How do you, I can see this already, like from this conversation where you're the front man and Grace, you're making sure that one conversation didn't get lost in the hundreds of conversations and that you're making most of the different opportunities you have. So, David, how do you think about that? Like when you're going to market, or is this just so second nature to you at this point in your career that you're just doing your thing?
There's a number of questions in there, so I'll try to pull them apart real quick. So you have to think through systems. So the 1 + 1 = 10 is because of a lot of relationship history, which I'll talk about last, and then the systems ability to keep those conversations going with momentum. And Grace is more than tracking. I mean, she's taking and synthesizing probably 30 to 40 meetings a week in the C-suite. So I think people really misunderstand or just don't understand the level of commercial intensity it takes to get a company off the ground at scale. That's not something that you can buy. In a lot of cases, you can't buy an army of salespeople or a bunch of partners to do that. And I know this for a fact. I didn't really realize this till we were acquired by Accenture and Accenture Song, our last company, is that we're probably 10 partners in one. So that's a prolific output. You can't do that if you don't have someone who has the intellect, the velocity, the urgency, the tools to scale, especially leveraging AI. Grace is very gifted in that as well, but it still needs to be human. So to handle that and get it to the 80, 90%, 90-yard line, so to speak, so I can sort of make it human in ours together is really, really a difficult task. And as she knows, I push very, very hard, and we have a good relationship and the friction of that. I'm not going to speak for Grace, but I know she will push back, or sometimes I have to apologize and get things right. But I think what's underneath the system, and the second part was the ability for someone to collectively manage that and get it to a point where you can act on it, is a very difficult task. But the last piece, I think, is the most important piece, which is, I think this is true about any part of your life, personal, professional, which is you should only do things, company, idea, charity, that when you're staring across the table with a leader who has a challenge that in your heart, you have the gnosis, not the idea, the gnosis, the truth is that you care more than anyone in the world. And if that's not true, you can't do it, because you're not going to be in a relationship long enough. I had 2 phone calls today with 2 CEOs. For 10 years, I've known them into the hardest parts of their career, and we've never done business, ever. So I've done that for 20 years and have, at least 1,000 relationships in the sort of C-suite or the ELT levels in the Fortune 500, if not the Fortune 200, that are absolutely real, and they're not transactional, and in the spirit of growth and transformation, these areas that they know we care more than anyone, and they always call, even if they're not paying. It's not about the money, it's about the care. So I would over communicate that you have to get a lot of these things right in your spirit, in your heart, your mind, the culture. Your team needs to know where those things sit together, and it needs to have massive, massive throughput of care and transactional value.
Interesting. So I dig this. Now, where my head is going, and this is something we talk about on the show a lot, this is something that I talk about in my professional role often. At a certain point, you're growing, you know what you're doing, you know what you're selling, you know the problems you're solving, you feel it with a burning passion, you know this better than anybody in the world. At a certain point, you can't just create another David. So when it comes to scaling that team, at what point do you decide it's time to bring on other people who are going to be selling, who are going to be in that, revenue engine? How do you, I'm going to put it like simply, but not, how do you do it? And where I'm going with that is a lot of people think when I hire salespeople, I've built a sales team. And in reality, it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think that's where a lot of founders, rely too heavily on assumptions and trip and fail. So can you talk a little bit about that?
It's actually one of the things that sort of limited our growth at our last company, Bionic. We kind of very aggressively over 6-7 years went from 0 to $27-28 million run rate. And then we also recognized that a lot of the relationships and our ability to scale was reliant on myself and our team, Grace, myself, and Johnsy. And the team grew the business once it was in, but we hadn't really built it ground up to create all the sense of ownership and sort of incentives to produce it at scale. So it didn't stop growing. It was limited. We had a very straight line path. It was a great business, very profitable. We moved it to a new platform like Accenture Song. It's now over 400 million revenues, one of their most successful acquisitions in their history, because you had just massive throughput. And that was the lesson to both of us, which is if you're going to scale something, you need the offering but you need really the model and the people that replicate it at scale and can replace you. You could, so we wouldn't quite in a place where we get hit by the bus test. If I get killed or something terrible, we'd be in trouble, and we may never be. But the resilience of the company is going to be because it has amazing people who are designed to scale the system, the offering you have in the marketplace, one by one by one. Every one of those individuals should be able to build a huge, successful outcome for the company and themselves. And so that was a different psychology, a different era, a different system, different organizational methodologies that we've been adopting. And I'm more hopeful that we'll be able to do that in these new companies.
Do you have any idea for how you're planning on doing that to people who you're going, like, because I'm looking at, our notes from the last conversation, systems over individuals is huge, is critical. And I think that 1,000%, especially when it comes to building a sales team. Who are you onboarding? How are you compensating them? There are so many, like, what's their character? What's their background? What are their initial targets? What do you think their ramp up is going to be? And why do you think that that's going to be their ramp up, like in terms of time and then, ultimately to revenue? So is that something you've thought about yet? Or is that something that you want to get there first?
Chris, you should take that one. You've been thinking about the model incentive for some time now.
We're at the early stages of both of these new companies where we're building these offerings for kind of the AI era. So there's a lot of kind of experimentation and learning with our current partners as we build out offering before we really truly seek to scale. So with that, David has kind of opened the door to some of these partners. And then the founding partners that we've brought in to lead delivery and help us scale are super trusted. They've been at David's other companies as well, veterans in what they do. And they have kind of those similar personality traits, attributes that would allow them to not only deliver on the work that we're selling, but then also to see the future opportunities and expand. So that's the one thing, having people in that are senior and experienced enough to identify the new opportunities. And then we've built the systems to be able to support them in that, because they don't have the time or capacity to be thinking about growth and revenue all day long. So what are the systems that we can bring in to help support them when they're trying to bring our offering to a different part of the business or kind of expand in the current part of the business? So AI has definitely helped with that a lot. We are very lucky to have a super smart chief AI officer, Lauren, on our team, who he kind of sees everything that I'm doing with BD and for David and I, and she has helped me to amplify that into skills that we can scale across the team. So everything that I'm updating in our BD systems is now being transferred to the team when they need it. And I think I would sit horizontal across all of them, just making sure that everything is kind of, if a signal comes in, just in the same way, if a signal comes in from David, making sure that we're pursuing it. If a signal comes in from one of our current partners, making sure that we're pursuing it there as well and not letting it fall aside, but also not forcing, we're never kind of pushing things through. We always want to find that way to be pulled through our current partners. We haven't really figured out how to replace David yet in the upfront, but in terms of scaling our current business, that's where the real value for our founding partners is.
There was a book that I was just reading called Who Not How, and it's very much about that. You can't tell if you bring in the right people, you can trust them to get it done, and it may be done with a different accent, a different flavor, but it's getting it done and getting it done the right way. And I thought that if you haven't read it, it's a fantastic.
I'm a big Audible book listener, so I know that I may have done that or deep stash. I wanted to over communicate something that Grace pointed out, which is, growth is everyone's challenge and everyone's ownership. We all own growth. It's not I do one thing, you do another thing. So everybody in the company, to some degree or another, is responsible for the entire company growing. So Grace's ability to go into teams and assist in, automating aspects of their own efforts or giving them the best learning that we have that has been successful has been hugely important. My co-founder, Lauren Vreens, she has spent nights and weekends rolling up her sleeves, building the dashboards, building assets, helping us become more efficient. She also has the permission, which she leverages, and it's a little nerve-wracking, and she will take the sales call recordings, the BD calls, we don't really sell, it's in sharing, and she will run analysis against that, hardcore analysis. And it's very tough feedback, but the level of accountability and transparency and people leaning in improves everyone. So if you aren't ready for that, you don't invite it in, you don't accept it, you're just simply not committed to growth, or you're not going to grow as fast. So you have to have that conspiracy to willing, but the collective ownership to go on offense and be humble enough to grow together.
You can't imagine how many like relevant things that you just said in that sentence. So, I mean, I'll tell you more another time, but my company builds sales teams for companies. It's what we do. And when ChatGPT first came out, became a thing, and I was in a sales role, the first thing I thought was, this is going to write all my emails for me. Like, I don't have to do the research anymore. I don't have to, if I can get out 10 in a day, like now I can get out 100. I don't have to read, the company's financial statement. It'll do all of this for me. But at that same time, when you're a salesperson and you're kind of heads down in what you're doing, you're not thinking, well, how could this be used to actually scale the systems and make our organization more efficient and make our biz dev more efficient and make us as salespeople more efficient? And you have companies like, for example, Gong, that have been listening to calls and giving feedback to salespeople for years. There's such a balance where we've heard companies saying, oh, well, we don't have a coach, for example, we don't have a manager, we give them the Gong. And it's like, it gives great feedback. But my take is that's like telling someone who's an alcoholic, right? We have something that's monitored your whole day, your whole week, your whole month. What's the feedback? You got to stop drinking. And it's like, thanks, I know. Whereas if you give that person a therapist and they can talk to them every week, then we can start cracking at stuff. So, when I would read these things and it's like, well, you spent too much time in discovery. I'm like, yeah, I know. Because I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, no kidding. Like, I'm trying to like buy time or just make them like me or something like that. And so when we give feedback to salespeople, to executives who we're coaching, you name it, we're certainly using AI to make our process faster, because otherwise there was a while it would take 4 hours for us to do any work on a 30-minute call, on a 1-hour call. But that said, like when I write my feedback, I need to make sure it doesn't if it's too AI, we all know what that is and we all kind of dispel it. Like, I need to be able to say, we talked about this last week, you fucking idiot. And I mean that in like a joking way. Like, I have a rapport with this person where it's really me. If they're reading this like a report card, it reads a little bit differently. So I think it's fascinating. When I first put through call transcripts into AI, wow, did it give good feedback? When I put it in through AI in a mechanism where it also has the way that I think about a call, like, holy shit, like this is really crazy. This is really cool. And I think that you guys are on it where you have to be tinkering with this. You have to be getting to the front, because the companies that aren't are going to be really left behind. Like, I put up a post and then I'm going to shut up, but like recently about how smiling and dialing is done. Like, just if you have a high enough pain threshold and a list of contacts, you can make money. The open rates are different. The way people answer is different. Intel is different these days. So if you're not playing that and you're still playing that just hit the phone and hit it hard game in an industry, you're going to lose like every single time. And I think that that's what I'm talking about there is like a very transactional sale, obviously. In your world where you have so many different contacts, so many different people, and so many just different relationships that you can like to be organized and optimize those is going to be the difference between you getting where you need to, when you want to, or takes 3 times. And then when, like you're saying, you're the leader of a sports team, you want to lead them to a championship. Listen, I'm a Jets fan and they've been promising for a long time. And if we're never getting there, like, we're not happy, I don't know. That was a long like diatribe, but everything that you said there about using AI and, it's when you use it in that internal process, it makes such a wild difference in how you're able to function.
Yeah, I think that the promise that AI could kind of replace the sales development representative or your sales team has been largely proved debunked. Everyone still wants that human to human interaction, especially when writing emails and especially when writing emails to senior stakeholders. It cannot be AI whatsoever. And early on, there was like a tension between David and I where we really were pushing to have everything be AI first, velocity. How can we scale our team to feel like it was a team of 10? And we quickly learned that emails were not the place. Emails and every sort of communication needs to be human first, your voice. Of course, AI has a role in accelerating your velocity. So your follow-up to your calls where it used to be 4 hours to collect your thoughts and figure out what you were going to say back. you're so right. And now that takes 30 minutes. So it's those internal systems and how are we processing the information? How are we identifying the patterns and the triggers that allow us to then write the email faster?
Given the breakdown of responsibility, is this something you're involved with and ideating on, or is this something you've got the right team, you're trusting them to be able to build and stay competitive?
I think we're still determining how to do that really well. I think we build a lot of systems using AI. We use a lot of tools. And then just to repeat what Grace just said, is that we scaled the volume of communication and the quality suffered. And I think we were discovered that our open rates or people's sense of response, they didn't feel it was actually, in my case, me writing them authentically. They're like, okay, this is not real, or it's not me. It doesn't sound like me, or it doesn't sound like a real relationship or someone who actually cares about me. And that we probably burned some people. Honestly, it was probably a mistake, but we learned quickly, to Grace's point. And our job is really to build the system to get it kind of like 80% there. And then you have to write through it. There might be core things that can be the same across whatever, 20, 30 different conversations, but you can't be dogmatic. It has to be about them. And I think you have to really move your spirit into them as they're reading this, as they're hearing you and saying, is this someone I know? Is it something I want to know? And is it real? If you don't pass those tests, I think you're going to be in the dustbin very quickly. And I think we're still trying to get that language and that tone right. But there are lots of places to save time and money with AI. And one place to not do that is in the communications that you personally need to write to leaders who you want to do business with. That is not a place to save money. That is the wrong use of AI. It's helpful to get you there, but it needs to be true. It needs to be from you.
It's one of those things like we were saying, like I notice on LinkedIn, AI posts, they just don't do as well. You glaze past them. You almost get annoyed that people it's just creating noise out there. And similarly, I always said AI ruined email and LinkedIn became what email was 5 years ago, just with the amount of spam and, the way that you can write messages. And I think exactly as you're saying, if I care so much about you, I'm sitting down and I'm putting pen to paper and I want to make sure that I'm writing this the right way. Whereas AI can write, 90% as good of a message as I can. That extra 10%, that's the difference between an A- and an A+. And if you're really trying to convey that you care to your clients, then you can't have somebody else write to them. So, I mean, the way that you've looked at other companies, you have your, where you want to be at certain points, where a certain head count, you want to be at a certain revenue amount, when do we raise? With all of this said, this must change like what your predictions look like and what your expectations are for the company. Can you talk a little more about that?
It's interesting because I say this because there are some people who have clarity on these things. There's some people who are sort of like living the question. I think we're aggressively living the question. The metrics of the business standard are not headcount, they're revenue per team member. And those revenue per team member expectations are growing. So when we first started, we're like, wouldn't it be amazing if it was $1 million per team member? And now, after the last 6 to 12 months, I'm thinking like, well, actually, it should probably be 3 million per team member, and maybe even more. I think the only way you should be thinking about scaling companies is that you're building a gusher of growth. Like the ability to grow with these tools, is an order of magnitude more significant than any time in our life. And so the expectations are growing. The systems have to take over a lot of responsibility, both in the workflow and the agentic nature of it. And we have, thank God, Lauren and our team building in her role as Chief AI Officer. We have great advisors, chief decision scientists at Google and the team, Cassie, and her thoughts as well. And we're sleeves rolled up with our partners who are also learning. So we're trying to uniformly get everyone elevated all at once. But I think these companies are going to be smaller and even more successful than any time. So it really does put an incredible microscope under the soul of the company. It really has to be extraordinary in every seat's ability to care deeply, to serve deeply, to deliver deeply. You can't have a weak link, but even today, it's even more profound. It's even more profound than ever before in our careers.
I get that. I'll tell you, when I started my company with AI, I felt like I was getting done what a 5-person company could do when it was just me and it was all by myself. And I think the very cool thing about it is, someone put this well, they're like, AI is great at handling drudgery. For example, like David, you're great at getting out there, being in front of people. Like, you're phenomenal at that. If you then have to go and fill out and manage an Excel spreadsheet, that's a waste of your hours. That's a waste. Something else should be doing that. So it's incredible that you can offload more of that your team can offload more of that so that you can really excel in what it is that makes you special. And I'll tell you another thought that I had with this, as you're looking to grow your team, let's say you're looking to bring on salespeople at some point. Not long ago, you're looking at, have they been in this industry? Do they have contacts? Do they know what we're talking about? Have they hit a number like this before? And now you almost have to consider, are they, AI adept? Are they AI forward? Because otherwise you're just going to have someone who turns and goes, as opposed to someone who can contribute and give ideas as to what's working and what might make the wheel more efficient.
Grace should take this because she's really adept at this, but I think you almost, in the next 90 days to call it 9 months, so 3 months, you really can't even join a company that's AI native without extraordinary skills of these tools. You couldn't even catch up. So the gap between team we're building is, if you're not already in a sprint and you have skill around this, you're too far behind relative to the organization to even consider you. So now you have a good relationship, but that gap is growing further and further. I feel this every single day, and I'm in it. Grace is even more deeply in it, and we're going pretty fast, but the pace and the divide is growing. And there's some funny anecdotes, I've seen this before, where you go to a party or a restaurant or something and people are really enjoying their lives and they're talking about their family and their kids, their future, et cetera. And what I'm thinking about is like, they have no idea what's coming. Right. I'm like, and we're in it and thinking and changing, and we're not even on the vanguard. We're just like a practitioner, the applied physics of this, let alone the theoretical physics of this. And we feel it. And so there's this distance conceptually, but practically in careers, and the criteria for the ability to even consider someone adopt them is growing more and more away from people who just don't have the skill or understand how they work. It's vast.
Yeah, I think that there's a bunch that you just said, David, that I'll expand on a little bit. So starting off, you have to have that kind of adaptable mindset and that ability to pick up new tools, experiment with them, decide when to put them down if they're not the right tools, always kind of like exploring, learning, growing your own skill set as it relates to like what's new, and because everything is changing with what AI can do on a weekly basis. So that's one part of it. It's like, is your profile of your person an experimenter, a learner, always trying to self-improve their own ways of working? The second part that we've actually been thinking about as a team and a company over the past couple of weeks is, how can we create our own AI tools and databases that are holding these skills that are specific to our company as we're learning and growing? And David, you said this well, so I know you'll expand on this, but especially if the vision is to sell the company, having our own AI knowledge base that is doing skills and transferring them to either new people that join the team, so they're not starting from zero, but they're picking up from everything that we've programmed in our tools, is really, there's huge value there. They don't have to start and pick up from day one. They can pick up from where we are now, but they have to have that proficiency to be able to use the tools themselves.
It's a great point. You have to think of, you're leveling up your team all at once with these tools, as she pointed out, in the structure. We use a lot of Claude and Claude Cowork and Code and Skills, but anybody who joins you will suddenly be, and as advanced to you, they'll have to do a lot of catching up, but they're not going to be totally left behind. But whoever acquires you and scales you is going to take that bedrock of skill where they can upskill everyone else all at once. And so you have to equally invest in that ability as a team, but you're bringing everyone along with you. The point is, it's going to be very hard for you to catch if you don't know how to engage with it.
And as you said, I think we're all feeling that. Where you need to be on it is constantly moving. I want to point something out just real quick. We've got like 10 minutes left. And first off, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've certainly been gripped in everything you guys are saying. Is there anything, while you have the platform here, is there anything that you folks wanted to talk about? Is there anything that you want to share with the audience, or just go, a little bit more into?
I would say the one thing that has just been raised in this conversation, I've been reminded about, is the quality of your team and your commitment and the people is so amplified today in kind of AI native ground up businesses, that you cannot emphasize enough how the quality of relationships, both personally and professionally. They're all, we're all whole humans, and you have to get that right from the get-go. And when it doesn't work, you can have someone who's really competent in a bad cultural fit, and you have so few people that can harm the whole thing. So not only is the world growing much faster, exponential is real, it's changing, it's being rebased, cost-based, zero-based in a lot of ways, but what it means to be a team and your investment in the team and who they are and who they're becoming and how they're growing. And doing that together is going to be utterly profound today, but more than ever in our entire lives. But Grace is a part of it. She should tell you how she feels. I mean, sure. And also, we're also at a distance. We have, a third of the company, or 50% of the company in New York, and the rest, two other places. So, she's having to adjust a lot, but she's still, I don't know, you can speak for yourself, but I'd be curious, Grace, how you feel about feeling that you're everyday part of the team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just to bring it back to what we were saying at the start of the podcast, working with David for 6 years, why it's worked is because he's so genuine and genuinely invested in the growth of personal and professional of every person on the team, in the same way that he's invested in the relationships with the senior leaders in his network. It's truly authentic and truly, truly genuine. And you feel that. And to bring it back to kind of his metaphor of the sports team, when the coach is really, really caring about everyone on the team wants to show up at 100% every single day. So it's the culture that he's created that allows all of us to really commit ourselves and invest in ourselves as well.
It's person by person. I mean, if you look across the team, we have a tremendous amount of history together, both by people who joined, who were referred to us in their history, but also a couple of members, John, Eric, and others, who we worked with for many, many years. And Lawrence, as the co-founder and CA officer, has so much impact under everyone's work and on, obviously the product experience, that it influences every part of our everyday life, our ability to even deliver on this stuff. And so you have to have someone who is out in front, but also working tirelessly behind you and to the side of you, and sometimes very unsolicited, coming in over the top, it happens all the time, which is, hey, I spent the weekend, I built a new dashboard for you, or I ran all of your sales stuff through an analysis and you suck. Like you have team members who are thinking about the work ahead of you and investing in ways that are very unexpected. Grace does this all the time. She goes way out in front of the team. She's like, I know this is coming in the next week. You're going to have to deliver this, the outcome of your entire, sprint with us. I just went ahead and did it for you to help you think about how we're connecting the sales or the growth line. So, and it ties us together, but like, that's not part of a job description. It's part of like getting ahead of, growth is everyone's job and everyone contributes to it. And also it's predictive. It's like, this is going to happen out in front of you. So I went and solved it. You have to make it your own. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm going to help you get there faster, catalyze you. And I think that has to happen not only in a network, but the network needs to speak to itself, which means each of the nodes of the network is helping the network get stronger by doing real work out in front, even when it's not asked for. It's just the right thing for the business. And I see that happening everywhere. And because of AI, you can do this everywhere. You could be out in front. And it's really a magical thing to see. And that's all from the team in Level Pivot.
I dig it. I see why you guys have worked together for so long.
It works. I'll share this last thing that you're never going to grow a company or a team without the ability to take risk. So you have to ask people to take risks. You need to expect them to take risks. You need to expect them to take risks. And you should assume that some portion of that is going to fail. And that's totally fine because you want that to happen. You want inexpensive, cheap failure, fast, but you want the people and the team to be doing a high velocity level of risk taking that pushes the company forward. And there's this tension between, the risk and the failure and the accountability for it to grow. And the way we solve that in the last few companies, and definitely we live this out, is this idea called the 7-to-1 rule. And it's a ratio of good to bad. And it's an extraordinary ratio, 7 times as much good as you do bad, but you're going to assume things break and fail, and you're going to make mistakes. But the truth is, it's an impossible ratio. It really doesn't work. The point, and that is the truth, which is I want you to take risks, and I assume you're going to fail, so don't try to be perfect. But when we do fail, let's keep the cost low, and let's deal with it shoulder to shoulder, because our default state to each other is that we forgive you. If you fail at a character level, go work on yourself. If you start failing a lot, maybe this is the wrong place for you, but it's going to become clear. But we want you to take risks and we want to go after it. And when we go after it, it's not personal. It's about elevating your growth and elevating the company to do that well. And I think Grace tolerates me a lot, but I think that's something that the 7-to-1 rule and the grace that's in our relationship in Grace will be the only way we could stay together because of the amount of pressure and velocity and risk taking that we do. Grace lives that out. She takes a tremendous amount of risk. And this everyone is the reason why we stay together.
Yeah, to add on to that, whenever David has constructive feedback, it's never a personal indictment against me or my character or anyone on the team, really. So because we have that belief where there is that permission to also give negative feedback or call out a mistake without it being detrimental to your standing on the team, if it's assuming you're living the ratio, it creates this permission to be candid, but also to accept the feedback and still feel safe and actually be able to grow and receive it and make changes.
Awesome. Well said. Max, thank you for this time together. I really appreciate it. While we were sitting here, you probably heard my phone ring, and that was one of our biggest clients. So we're at the hour. I was really grateful for this time together and time to get back to growth.
Time to get back to it. And that's a wrap for this episode of Closing Conversations. Huge thanks to David Kidder and Grace Keenan for joining me. The big takeaway: growth is not a department, it's everyone's job. AI can make teams faster, leaner, and more powerful, but it cannot replace trust, real communication, or judgment. The companies that win will be the ones that move fast without becoming impersonal. If you liked this episode, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's building a company or leading a team. And if you're building a sales team that needs stronger systems, better coaching, and more consistent execution, head over to www.commissionsales.com. We'll see you next time. And until then, let's get closing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, you can always catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more episodes of Closing Conversations.